These are 4 players that you should not be afraid to draft in fantasy football this year because they are primed for monster bounce back seasons. Starting at number 4, Terry McLaurin. We've been waiting for 5 years now for that insane breakout season that we know Terry is capable of, but we just haven't seen it, and a lot of it can be blamed on the quarterback play. Here is the list of every quarterback that Terry has played with. Let me know what you think. We got Case Keenum, Colt McCoy, Alex Smith, Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Carson Wentz, and Sam Howell. You guys, it's been tough sledding. It's just really not fair that some players come right into the league, like let's say Jamar Chase. He has Joe Burrow, and he was his college teammate at that. And poor Terry McLaurin, all the talent in the world, and he just can't get a quarterback. Well, that changes this year when the Washington Commanders spent the 2nd overall pick to get Jaden Daniels out of LSU. Let me tell you what, this guy is special. There's already been raving reports from camp that he's picking up the playbook at ease. He already looks like a veteran out there. He's making impressive throws. I think he's the real deal. And if you just look at the numbers, you guys, he's much more than just a running quarterback. He's the first and only FBS player in the history of college football with 12,000 passing yards and 3,000 plus rushing yards. He's the definition of a dual threat. He might be a better version of Lamar Jackson when it's all said and done because of his passing metrics. He led all passers in deep ball passing grade and deep adjusted completion rate in his final year at LSU. And now you bring in a guy like Cliff Kingsbury as the new offensive coordinator who has a lot of experience with dual threat quarterbacks from his time in Arizona with Kyler Murray. I honestly think Daniels is the perfect fit for what Kingsbury wants to do, which is run a lot of run-pass options, attack down the field, and the main beneficiary of this new system, new offensive coordinator, massive upgrade at quarterback, in my opinion, is gonna be Terry McLaurin. And hey, I don't blame you for being like, Terry McLaurin, he hasn't done much of anything. Well, in 2022, he was the wide receiver 12 overall in fantasy points. He was outside the top 20 in fantasy points per game, which admittedly is the metric we look for more, is the fantasy points per game. But still, from a bird's eye view, it doesn't look like Terry has done much since entering the league. He had 7 touchdowns his rookie year, and he has not gotten back to that number since. He's either had 4 or 5 receiving touchdowns every single season. And while he does have 4 straight seasons of 1,000 receiving yards, I don't know. I'm not a big 1,000 receiving yard is that impressive of a metric for a receiver, especially in this day and age with how pass heavy most NFL teams are. He's also never had more than 87 receptions. I think Terry McLaurin is a 100 plus reception type guy this year. He's going to go over 1,000 yards. I bet he goes over 1,300 yards. And for the first time in his career, he's going to have double-digit touchdowns. You can get Terry McLaurin at the end of the 4th round right now. That is crazy value. I'm putting this out in the universe right now. I think McLaurin is going to have a season like what Cooper Kupp had when Matthew Stafford came to town. He was a round 4 pick, I believe, the previous year. And then he was the wide receiver 1 the following year, the Triple Crown winner. Now, I don't think Terry puts up that insane of numbers, but the premises is still there. A massive quarterback upgrade, a new system. McLaurin has that type of upside. I would not be surprised at all if Terry is a top 12, top 15 fantasy receiver this year. At number 3, Mark Andrews. Andrews has had back-to-back injury-riddled seasons. Last year was the worst, where he suffered that dreaded hip drop tackle in week 11, broke his ankle, and was out the rest of the fantasy season. And then the year before that, he was banged up towards the second half of 2022. He played 15 games, but if you go back and look at the numbers, he was definitely, I believe it was a hip injury. He had a hip and a knee. He was managing 2 or 3 injuries the second half of the year, was terribly ineffective. I actually had him on my roster, so I remember this vividly. He kind of lost me my league because he did nothing the second half of the year. That all being said, Andrews is still well within his prime. We know what he's capable of. And from weeks 1 to 10 last year before he got hurt, he was the tight end 3. And then we all know about 2021 where he was the tight end 1 overall. and in 2020 he was the tight end 4. So this guy is still a stud. A lot of people probably who got burned by him last year don't want to touch him this year, but he's actually a really great value because Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, Kincaid, Travis Kelce are all kind of stealing the spotlight right now, which we like. With offensive coordinator Todd Monken in town, we saw last year Baltimore be a little bit more pass heavy than they were in previous years. I expect that to continue. Lamar Jackson also set career highs in passing yards, completion percentage, and yards per attempt. We really like to see that. And he doesn't have much competition for targets outside of Zay Flowers. OBJ is gone. We've been trying to make a thing of Rashad Bateman for years now. I don't see it happening. And even if he does have a solid year, he's not going to take away much of anything from Mark Andrews. You can draft Andrews right now at the beginning of round 5. That's a screaming value if you don't want to pay up for guys I just talked about. I love snagging Andrews here, who still has tight end 1 overall in his realm of possibility. I believe he's entering his age 29 season. Still well within his prime, like I said, with a good quarterback, good system, not much competition for targets to kind of put a bow on it. At number 2, Jalen Waddle, coming off a rough year, had some bad touchdown luck. We know touchdowns are not a sticky stat. They obviously can vary drastically from year to year. He was wide receiver 24 in fantasy points per game and a career low 4 touchdowns. We don't like that. It was by far his worst season since entering the league 3 years ago. But here's some reason to be optimistic and why the bounce back is going to be unparalleled. Waddle still set career highs last year in yards per route run, in targets per route, and in 2022, even with Tyreek Hill on the roster, Waddle still racked up 75 receptions, over 1,300 yards, and 8 touchdowns. And I know people don't like to hear it, but Tyreek Hill is now 30 years old, and while he didn't show any signs of declining last year, it can hit these guys pretty quick. It is a possibility that we see a little bit of a dip, a little bit of a decline in Hill's play this year. And if that is the case, the main beneficiary of that is going to be Waddle. Waddle is still very young. I think he's one of the most talented receivers in the game. He's got a stable quarterback in Tua, a brilliant head coach, play designer in Mike McDaniel. Everything has stayed the same. There's nothing really that's changed drastically. I'm not really worried about OBJ. He's going to be far and away the wide receiver 3. He's going to have those big splash plays, but nothing more than that. He's not going to take away anything from Waddle. I wouldn't worry about that. Betting on talented players like Waddle to bounce back after an unlucky year is always a smart idea. You can get Waddle in the 2nd round, and he's going after receivers like Devontae Adams, who I think is going to be a major bust at cost this year. Nico Collins, who's way too expensive with that crowded Texans wide receiver room. I think Waddle has immense upside this year. He's a player you must target and don't shy away from drafting after a rough season last year. And at number 1, Joe Burrow. Injuries plagued Burrow's season from start to finish last year. More than anything, you just felt bad for the guy. He came into training camp. He strained his calf, which we know calf strains are a tricky injury. They tend to linger. He was smart with it. He rehabbed. And then the beginning part of the season, he played right away. He still wasn't himself, but he was still out there. And then week 5 hit. And from weeks 5 to 10, he went bonkers, averaging 296 passing yards per game, 2.4 touchdowns, and was the QB4 in fantasy points per game over that 5-week stretch. We're like, all right, this is the Burrow that we know. When he's healthy, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And then he suffered that weird injury, that ligament tear in his wrist in week 11, which is just a fluky, freaky accident. It was just awful to see. And it was just like, man, he worked so hard to get back from that calf injury and then down again. He was out for the rest of the year. Everything that I've read, everything that I've seen, I don't think that he's going to be affected at all by the wrist injury. I know that's going to deter some people from drafting him. That won't for me. Everything that I've read, watched, I think he's going to be completely 100% healthy by the time the season starts. And I know a lot of people are going to be quick to call Burrow injury prone. I'm not there yet because in 2021 and 2022, He had 2 fully healthy, really good seasons where he threw 34 and 35 touchdown passes respectively. I know he was injured in year 1 and then last year. It's hard to predict injuries for quarterbacks because they don't get hit nearly as often as, let's say, a running back. Cincinnati also invested heavily in their offensive line in protecting Joe Burrow. They brought in Trent Brown from New England. So now they have 2 massive bookends protecting their franchise quarterback in Orlando Brown and Trent Brown. Both are ginormous, standing at 6'8". I know that doesn't really matter, but I think they're both 2 really good offensive linemen. If Orlando Brown can kind of get back to playing the way that we know he can play, this offensive line could be really good. And if you protect Joe Burrow, if you give him time to throw, if you keep him clean, he is filthy. He's one of the best to ever do it. He's one of the best in the league right now. I think Burrow and Jamar Chase are going to have a historic year. I think we see a lot of Jamar Chase out of the slot, which will be easy fantasy points for Burrow and Chase with Tyler Boyd gone, who was their slot receiver. Have Higgins and Burton on the outside. And then you have Gesicki, the big tight end, coming over from Miami, who will kind of take away attention down the middle. Something that Cincinnati hasn't had in years, which is also going to open up their best player on offense for Burrow to throw to, which is Chase. Man, I'm just salivating just talking about it. I love the Burrow-Chase stack, obviously. I think these 2 are going to be incredible for fantasy. I think a lot of people are going to be a little bit hesitant to draft Burrow and Chase because of some of the injuries as of late. I think Chase is going to be the wide receiver 1 overall right now. Put that into the airways, book it. I think that's an easy bet to make, honestly. I don't think that's that bold whatsoever. All in all, Burrow is going to have a career year. I think it's a lock that he outperforms his round 8 ADP. He's a player you should absolutely not hesitate to draft. And the people that are bold enough and are not afraid to make that bet are going to reap the benefits this year in fantasy. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.